Now we're going to add a badge that contains the score that game critics have assigned each game. So let's bring up DevTools and inspect the response. So look, each game has a property called Metacritic. This is a number between 0 to 100. Now, the color of the badge will be dependent on the score. So high scores should be green, medium scores should be yellow. Now, we don't want to implement all this logic inside our game card because that's a distraction. So we should create a new component for rendering the critic score. First, we go to our game interface and add a new property called Metacritic of type number. Next, we add a new component called critic score. Now, here we need a prop for receiving the score. So let's use an interface to define the shape of props. Here we have score of type number. Next, let's add the score here. Now, to render the score, we're going to use the badge component defined in Chakra. So we add a badge and render the score right here. Now, we don't need to import React. So we're done with this component for now. Let's see if it's working. So back to our game card. Let's add the critic score component right here and set the score to game.metacritic. Now, I don't like the name of this property because a game can have various metadata. So again, this is one of those issues in the design of this API, but it is what it is. We have to deal with it. Let's see what we get up to this point. So, all right, here's our badge, looking good. Next, I want to move this right here. So we should wrap these two components inside a horizontal stack. So back to our card. Here we add an HStack component to wrap these two components. Now to move the critic score to the right side, here we should set justify content to space between. So the available space is distributed between these two items. Now we don't need the braces here. Let's simplify the code. Good. So here's what we get. Lovely. Now let's improve the look and feel of this badge. So back to our critic score component. Here I'm going to set font size to 14 pixels to make it a little bit larger. That's better. I also want to add some horizontal padding. So here we can set padding X to a pixel value like 5 pixels, or we can go with the space system in Chakra. We can set it to 1. We don't see much changes, so what if we set it to 2? Okay, that's better. Next, I want to make the corners a little bit more round. To do that, we set border radius to, let's say, 4 pixels. Okay, it's looking good. Now, as I said, the color of the badge should be dependent on the score. So let's say if the score is greater than 75, it should be green. If it's greater than 60, it should be yellow, and so on. To implement this, we declare a variable called color. Here we can say if score is greater than 75, we're going to set the color to green. Otherwise, if the score is greater than 60, we're going to set it to yellow. Otherwise, we're going to set it to an empty string. Now, finally, here we can set color scheme to color. We also have a prop called color. This only sets the foreground color. But if we set color scheme, this applies an entire color scheme, including the foreground and background, as well as any other colors used for borders, shadows, and so on. So let's see what we get. All right, now our badges are green because most of these games are pretty high scored. Beautiful. So let's wrap up this step and commit our code to our repository. So here I'm going to say displaying critic score.